Bulgaria's latest elections are underway, their eighth poll in 5 years, with the outcome possibly reshaping the relationship the EU's poorest country has with both Moscow and Brussels. European leaders are watching the parliamentary election closely, with ex-president Rumen Radev, a pro-Russian former fighter pilot, the frontrunner for his political alliance. While he's officially denounced Russia's invasion of Ukraine, he has repeatedly opposed military aid to Kyiv and has a far more Moscow-friendly view than most EU leaders. Now, a Radev victory could create another headache for the EU just after Hungary's pro-Russian leader Victor Orban was voted out of office. Among his key competition is former Prime Minister Boyko Borisov's alliance. He dominated Bulgarian politics for over a decade. He's pro-EU, pro-NATO, but his critics say he's fostered systemic corruption, which he denies. Now, this vote follows mass protests in January, which toppled the previous government over a corruption scandal. So I think the best is to get some analysis and greater understanding of what's at stake. And for that, we are joined by Dimitar Keranov. He is an expert in Eastern European, particularly Bulgarian politics, as well as democratization. Dimitar is currently at the German Marshall Fund's European Resilience Programme, and he joins us today from Bulgaria. Great to have you on the show, Dimitar. So Bulgaria has a population of around 6.5 million. So why does Bulgaria's election actually matter internationally more than its size might actually suggest?
Thank you for having me. Well, Bulgaria matters far more than just one election because it's a country on NATO's eastern flank, a member of the EU with the Black Sea coastline and a border with Turkey. So actually, whether it can produce a government that's capable to act and capable to ensure stability is, from a strategic standpoint, very important, as well as for the European Union, but also for NATO. So the continued paralysis that we have been having, it has no longer just domestic consequences. They are now European consequences.
Yeah, certainly very important issues that you've highlighted there. Before we continue, I want to bring in actually the former president, Rumen Radev. He's the front runner in this election in Bulgaria because he spoke, and then we're going to continue on. So let's take a listen.
I hope that we will develop practical relations with Russia based on mutual respect and equal treatment. This is our approach to Russia. We have to respect our history. You know the role of Russia for liberating Bulgaria. This is very important, and of course we'll never forget, but today's relations should be based on practical approach, especially in economy, especially in security. I do believe that there will future steps to finally set the relations between Europe and Russia based on a security agreement. This is extremely important for our future.
We were just hearing there from the former president, Rumen Radev. He's the pro-Russian former president, as I said, who's been tipped to top the polls. Now, he's openly supported renewed ties with Russia while at the same time opposing military aid to Ukraine. But he also says he would not veto EU decisions. So, Dimitar, how much concern then is there in Brussels? And are they gearing up for a new type of leader, a new leader who could be similar to Victor Orban?
Yes, so first of all, I think it's important to clarify that Russian influence has been a very serious challenge to Bulgaria's democratic path ever since the fall of communism in 1989. Which has continued to this day, this challenge. So, of course, we have some explicitly pro-Russian parties like Revival, for example. And of course, we have also the very serious problem of Russian disinformation. And now, if we take all of this in connection to Rumen Radev's Progressive Bulgaria Party and what Radev government would mean. So first, I think Radev's government would, as a person who has consistently accommodated Russian positions during his presidency, of course, this should be very concerning for Brussels. And to be Kremlin friendly is as the possible next head of against strategically important EU and NATO member country, this is, I think, should be quite disturbing for Brussels. That being said, I think at first I do not expect a fundamental change in Bulgaria's foreign policy, even with Rumen Radev's Progressive Bulgaria and him being the head of government, because Bulgaria is anchored well in NATO and EU structures, so we can expect a rhetorical shift. But of course, we should also be mindful that what begins as a rhetorical shift can then escalate to something more.
Right.
And even if, for example, right now we're not, or many people are not thinking that Bulgaria, Progressive Bulgaria and Rumen Radev can become something like Victor Orban and Fidesz, well, at least in terms of the stance on Ukraine and the ties to Russia, I think just having this danger there is quite disturbing, and this could be very unpredictable, and it could easily escalate
Right.
to something closer to what we saw under Orban's regime and Fidesz.
Yeah, I want to jump in there, Dimitar, because just for our viewers who are watching at home, we were seeing images there before of Rumen Radev several years ago when he met Vladimir Putin actually in Moscow. He met him on several occasions. He met him throughout his presidency. I believe the last time that they met was 2018, 2019 period. And I mean, what you were saying there about, essentially that it's just sort of, are you saying in many ways that the EU sort of needs to keep a sort of a close eye then on Bulgaria and to sort of make sure that things don't, we'll say, escalate slowly but surely in Bulgaria if Rumen Radev does end up becoming the leader there in Bulgaria?
Yes, exactly. I think Brussels should be keeping a closer eye. That's correct, because I think democratic backsliding in Bulgaria has been real, coupled with Russian influence and corruption, which is also a channel for Russian influence. So we need to be aware that Bulgaria is a defective democracy, unconsolidated democracy, and highly dysfunctional democracy, if you will, even. So all of this, of course, adds to instability. And yes, this could very uncomfortably, of course, then in time escalate if it's not given the proper attention. And I think Bulgaria has been also, unfortunately, that when we talk about democratic backsliding and Russian influence, it has been largely ignored because the focus was elsewhere, for example, in Hungary. So if we want to avoid quite unfortunate developments in Bulgaria in the future, maybe we should focus more on it. Especially Brussels.
Yeah, I mean, you're sending a pretty clear warning there, we'll say, to the EU and to Brussels. We mentioned earlier NATO. You also mentioned it. From NATO's perspective, Bulgaria sits, of course, on the alliance's eastern flank. It's you know, right on the Black Sea there. Now, if the next government questions aid to Ukraine, how would that affect NATO's security position there in that crucial part of the world in the Black Sea?
I think, well, first of all, this is going to be an image problem and a very uncomfortable at that. Second, I think the immediate consequences will not be felt so fast because things accumulate and this takes time. But of course, when there's not enough unity, especially when it comes to Ukraine and to Russia's threat that it poses to Bulgaria, to the European Union, and to NATO as general. In general, of course, this should be highly. This is a highly disturbing thought, and it should not be taken lightly.
Yeah. Now, one thing that I've kind of looked at a lot is that voters seem. I mean, you mentioned it as well, the issue of corruption, right, and this political instability in Bulgaria, and many voters, you know, are motivated by their day-to-day issues, the economy, like you mentioned before, the political instability, more so than geopolitics. So I'm quite interested to know how you view this, how those, we'll say, domestic issues could actually, and that frustration could indirectly reshape Bulgaria's foreign policy. How do you see that?
Yes. So first of all, I think it's just important also for the viewers to mention that in Bulgaria, the traditional, let's call it left-right axis in politics, it barely exists anymore because the Bulgarian parties nowadays are mostly organized not around some sort of economic ideology or specific social policy in the way Western European parties are, for example. They're organized around strong leaders, personal networks, and of course, increasingly the question of where Bulgaria stands geopolitically, which I mean more in relation to, of course, Ukraine and also the relationship to Russia. So, of course, Bulgaria economically has improved a lot since it joined the European Union, but still major issues remain. And I think also the economic problems are due to the corruption that I mentioned before. And unfortunately, corruption in Bulgaria is systemic. And we need to understand this because this is very important because corruption coupled with economic hardships that the many Bulgarians are experiencing in their day-to-day lives are not to be ignored. But also the Bulgarian voter is again also very interested in Bulgaria's geopolitical debates and standings. So these are all topics that converge together, and of course they influence the voter preferences.
Yeah, I want to take you up there on that point that you made about Bulgaria joining the Eurozone. But does that integration then not limit how far any government, no matter what their stance is with regards to Russia, kind of not realistically sort of limit how much they can pivot away from Brussels and we'll say the ECB in general?
Yes, of course, the Eurozone was a major milestone in Bulgaria's European integration. And it is correct to say that actually Bulgaria joining the Eurozone, it was very uncomfortable for the Russian influence and lobby in Bulgaria because it anchored Bulgaria, yet it integrated Bulgaria deeper into European Union structures and it also took away one major point of Russian disinformation that was also channeled by certain pro-Russian actors, political actors in Bulgaria, that somehow the whole economic system of Bulgaria would collapse after joining the Eurozone, and the inflation will be so high, and of course, mass poverty. None of this happened. And I think also in this context, the further Bulgaria becomes anchored and integrated into the NATO and into the European Union, the harder it will be for the Russian influence to be very effective. But I need to also mention that it's the problem of combating Russian influence is far from over, and the Eurozone accession was, of course, a positive step. But again, there's a long way to go on this.
Yeah, do you see this election as a sort of in some ways, a geopolitical turning point? I mean, you said something earlier there about that in many respects, you know, people hadn't been paying attention, or Europe hadn't been paying attention so much to Bulgaria as a result of what was happening under Victor Orban in Hungary. Or do you see this election sort of as a warning sign about how, you know, prolonged political instability can sort of then impact within a European member state, an EU member state? It can then result in problems, say, for all of the European Union.
Yes, I think, as I said also earlier, we need to keep in mind that Bulgaria is a dysfunctional democracy under serious Russian influence, and that has been going on for a long time now. And of course, if one European Union member is unstable, and especially when we're talking about Bulgaria, which is again a key, strategically key NATO and EU member, I think the continued instability coupled with the unresolved issue of Russian influence and systemic corruption, which, of course, systemic corruption opens more channels for Russian influence. I think if we ignore this more, we might wake up to a very uncomfortable situation, and we shouldn't underestimate the dangers that pro-Russian politicians and even undecisiveness or certain ambiguity on Ukraine, on the Bulgaria stance on Ukraine, and even warming up, even rhetorically, relations with Russia. We shouldn't ignore the danger that this poses to the European Union as a whole. Because again, I'm saying if one country has a problem, everybody has a problem.
Dimitar, we're going to leave it there, but really great to get your insights and analysis. Dimitar Keranov, fellow at the German Marshall Fund's European Resilience Programme. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
So we've been really breaking down what's been going on there in Bulgaria. How concerned are you of what the outcome of this election may look like and what it could result in for the European Union and NATO as a whole? Should the EU also be taking a closer look at what's going on within EU member states and Bulgaria particularly at the moment? Send us in your comments and, of course, your questions, because we always love to get those. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget that you can watch us, of course, on social media, on YouTube, and I'm Pablo Follielias in Berlin. For me and the team, thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll see you soon.